So, when it comes to ENM, what is the lay of the land between soft swapping, duos on TikTok, non-monogamy hashtags like trending all over the place, and polyamory quickly becoming a mainstream word? What is really happening out there? You might be surprised to hear that the interest in non-monogamy is showing up in every generation, although with some slight differences. So stick around to learn more about your own cohorts. I'm the sex Mormon therapist with the emphasis on X. I'm a certified sex therapist here to help you get the information we never got at church, unlearn the shame we did get at church, and reconnect you with your pleasure. Subscribe if you're looking for real talk and tips and tricks to better sex and relationships. Okay, let's start with Generation Z, which generally includes people born between 1997 and 2012. That means Gen Zers are roughly between 13 to 28 years old. They're the first generation to grow up entirely in the internet and smartphone era. They are digital natives with strong values tied to culture, social justice, and challenging relationship norms. They're pervasively comfortable with visibility, sharing all kinds of personal information and perspectives on social media. They have more open discourse than any other generation and a lot fewer taboos. They tend to resonate with the relationship anarchy movement. About 36% of 25 to 36-year-olds identify with this, emphasizing consent, fluidity, equality, those kinds of values. Their ready access and comfort with tech has them very comfortable in navigating dating apps, like accessing porn, normalizes diverse sexual experiences. They're living in what I call the biggest experiment in human history with unprecedented access to information, which seems to broaden their exploration, and they're the most comfortable of all the generations with technological advances and how that intersects with their sexuality. Due to different economic challenges that they are facing than older generations, they might be more apt to delay things like marriage or home ownership, while still very much wanting to experiment within relationships in both late adolescence and emerging adulthood. We see a lot of social media and streaming reality shows like Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which, by the way, I did a little of a show up in that, talking about concepts like swinging and soft swapping, which increases visibility and boundary testing. Gen Z still fantasizes about monogamy and seeks stability, so it's not necessarily a uniform idea, and ethical non-monogamy is seen as fulfilling but requiring communication and emotional labor. Basically, non-monogamy resonates with Gen Z's desire for authenticity and relational exploration. It combines viral formats like TikTok, POVs, duets with data-driven credibility, etc., and aligns with their broader cultural conversations around gender, consent, and relational diversity. Okay, let's move on to millennials. These are folks typically born between 1981 and 1996, currently ages around 29 to 44, who are very much part of the cultural shift toward exploring non-monogamy, but their approach tends to differ slightly from Gen Z's in their tone, their motivation, and their framing. They are more open to it than previous generations. According to a 2023 YouGov poll, 43% of millennials said that they were open to non-monogamous relationships, compared to 33% of Gen X and 20% of boomers. 1 in 4 millennials said that they have engaged in some form of consensual or ethical non-monogamy. And unlike Gen Z's often experimental, fluid relationship styles, like relationship anarchy, or what are called situationships, millennials often approach non-monogamy from a place of therapeutic awareness, clear agreements, desire for growth after monogamous burnout. They may turn to polyamory, open marriages, or swinging in the context of already having done some relational self-work. And by the way, the term situationship refers to romantic or sexual relationships that lack clear labels, commitment, or long-term expectations. So relationships that exist in this gray area between friendship and dating. Many millennials in long-term relationships or marriages view ethical non-monogamy as a way to reignite desire, address mismatched libidos, expand sexual freedom without ending a stable partnership. They want to build deeper communication and trust, which might seem ironic, but very supported actually by the research regarding the positive effects of ethical non-monogamy. This often shows up in terms like monogamish, ethical non-monogamy, or conscious or consensual non-monogamy. Many millennials are parenting or deep in career growth, so their non-monogamy choices are more structured, such as calendar dates, agreements about childcare and home life, prioritizing emotional labor to maintain balance rather than chasing novelty. They're often seeking authenticity, sustainability, and agency. Many progressive millennials see non-monogamy as aligned with anti-capitalist and anti-patriarchal values, LGBTQ plus inclusion and queer kinship models, deconstructing toxic monogamy scripts such as jealousy equals love, and they are definitely breaking down what I call the ownership model that's traditionally seen as commitment. And the ownership model is referring to it being less about you belonging to me and I belong to you, which sounds very romantic in a lot of love songs, but when you really break that down, it's actually treating people like property, and more about I belong to myself and I want to decide how to share my life with you and our mutual responsibilities. In summary, millennials tend to approach non-monogamy as a conscious alternative to traditional monogamy, a healing or growth-oriented process, a form of values-aligned living, especially amongst therapists, progressives, and queer folks. They're more likely than older generations to pursue non-monogamy with boundaries, resources, and community, but less casual than Gen Z's public experimentation. Let's move to older generations. They are also exploring non-monogamy, but often in quieter, less public-facing ways. Here's how it's showing up for Gen X and boomers especially. Many Gen Xers, this is kind of the folks born between 1965 and 1980, so people in their 40s to 60s, are redefining intimacy after long-term marriages, often following divorce or being widowed, or the shift into midlife identity work. There's a surge in polyamory and open relationships among people in their 40s to 60s, especially in progressive urban areas or therapeutic circles. These folks are often seeking depth, authenticity, freedom, and conscious reconnection with desire after decades of relational caretaking. Unlike Gen Z's public TikToks and Reels, older adults often explore ENM through private Facebook groups, subreddits like r/polyamory or r/non-monogamy, local meetup or kink scenes, and also in therapy and coaching services. They're less visible, but not less engaged, just navigating with more caution due to stigma, family image, or professional concerns about their reputations due to the familiar taboos that many of us are aware of. For boomers and older Gen Xers, swinging has often been the gateway to ENM, but is now being rebranded as soft swapping, lifestyle, or play partnerships. There are many clubs, retreats, and travel experiences for sexploration and are thriving for people who are 50 plus. Some older clients are moving from just sex to emotional connection in, for example, polycules. I often talk to folks that midlife is a developmental stage with tasks associated with it, where people are revisiting what they want for their life in the midst of the existential reality that there isn't a whole lot of time left. So what do I want now? Especially if children have launched, and I now might be more financially stable than in earlier chapters of life. These folks are looking for late life liberation. Things like dealing with post-menopause, retirement, or grief, like loss of a partner, can spark interest in relationship freedom and sexual rebirth. Some older adults find monogamy never suited them, but didn't have language or cultural permission until later in life to explore these concepts. Let's now dive into some of the research. So studies show rising interest in ENM across all age groups. For example, a 2020 Kinsey Institute study found that 1 in 5 Americans have engaged in some form of consensual non-monogamy, and interest is not confined to younger people. A 2022 YouGov poll showed 20% of people 45 and older would consider non-monogamy, especially if it were framed around mutual respect and personal growth. A 2016 Kinsey Institute study reported that about 21 to 22% of single Americans had engaged in some form of ENM, such as polyamory, swinging, or open relationships at least once in their lives. Furthermore, approximately 4 to 5% of people currently in relationships identify as ethically non-monogamous, and about 12% consider ENM their ideal relationship type. That's from PubMed Central. A February 2023 YouGov survey found that 34% of Americans prefer something other than strict monogamy, ranging from mostly monogamous to fully non-monogamous. Among different age groups, under 45s report 17% engagement in CNM, while it's just 3% among people over 65, indicating non-monogamy's greater prevalence in younger cohorts. But remember that oftentimes, even in anonymous studies, people will underreport, even when it's anonymous, due to stigma and shame. So, key takeaways. Ethical non-monogamy is not limited to younger generations, but visibility and interest are more concentrated in Gen Z and millennials. A sizable minority across all age brackets are experimenting with or interested in non-monogamous structures. Trends include swinging, open relationships, and polyamory, more openly explored in younger adults, yet present across the age spectrum. If you enjoy my content and want to go deeper, go sign up for my newsletter at natashahelfer.com. You'll get a free copy of my current download full of juicy information. Also, make sure to leave your comments and questions for me. Let's interact. What's your take on all of this? What generation do you fit into? Do you see the values of your generation in your personal experience, or do you resonate with other generations' values more? Sound off below, no judgment. Remember to ring my bell and subscribe.